Welcome to Lyme Time. I'm Allie from the Tick Chicks. We are all more than Lyme disease and chronic illness, and together we stand with you to overcome and rise. I'll bring you closer to the experts in cutting-edge treatments and even a few unexpected ways of healing. I'll ask the questions you want answers to regarding Lyme disease and successful ways of getting you closer to 100%. We are in this together and will not be defined by Lyme. Pamela Salzman is a cooking instructor, cookbook author, holistic health counselor, and food blogger. Pamela's first cookbook, Kitchen Matters, was published in 2017, and her second book, Quicker Than Quick, was released in 2020. She's the culinary nutritionist for Clean Eating magazine and a contributor to the Food Network Kitchen app. Pamela has appeared on numerous media outlets, including The Today Show, The Rachel Ray Show, Hallmark's Home and Family, dozens and dozens of local TV shows, Goop, Mind Body Green, Elle Magazine, Allure, and many others. She shares her family-friendly recipes and nutrition tips on her website, PamelaSalzman.com, and social media channels. Pamela lives in Manhattan Beach, California with her husband and 3 children, and I am so excited to be talking to you today. Pamela, thank you and welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is going to be a fun and informative chat.
Yes. I mean, first, I just have to think back before my Lyme disease journey even began. You would be so nice and lovely and actually come to my friends' homes and teach us how to cook healthfully and easy meals. Some of my girlfriends didn't really love cooking and they didn't know the basics of cooking. And then you had fun stuff for people like me who loves to cook. And cooking is my love language for my family and friends. So it was a lot of fun getting to know you back in the day. And now look what's going on. You have 2 beautiful cookbooks, and I just can't wait to talk to you about this. Now, as you know, our audience is primarily Lyme disease and other chronic illness listeners out there. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about just kind of the love and science and nutrition behind all your recipes, because what I found in my journey is that it took me years to understand what healthy eating was. And I know it sounds crazy, but I'm a Midwestern girl. And like I said, cooking is my love language. I'm cooking for a whole family. And so, that's often challenging, but I just really found your cookbooks I already had them because I loved the recipes, but then I am now appreciating them in such a different light because you really take out a lot of that stuff anyway without, announcing it on every recipe. It's just there. It's just already there, and everything's so yummy. So let's get into it a little bit. Let's talk about your journey to nutrition and wellness and everything through your love of cooking. How did your obsession begin?
Well, I've always loved to cook. I was cooking at a very young age just for fun. And back when we were kids, we didn't really have the resources in terms of being able to find recipes the way we can now. We there were no TV shows per se. There were very few magazines. You basically just had whatever cookbooks were on your mom's shelf. That's what you kind of had to work with. And so my mom worked full time, she just didn't have a lot of time to experiment in the kitchen. So we kind of ate a lot of the same stuff every single week. She always cooked fresh, and my dad grew up in Italy, and, Italians don't like fast food and all that. So we grew up with gardens and the whole thing. So she was just making a lot of the same stuff all the time. And I was just like a born foodie. Like, I knew that there was more out there. I knew that there was more interesting food. So I just kind of taught myself how to cook, and she was perfectly happy to let me. And, I started to also make connections later on as I got older between what I ate and how I felt. And that really started to come into play more after I left home, when I was in college, because we were eating very like fresh food all the time at home. And then when I was in college, I was not eating fresh food. I was eating like dining hall food, late night convenience food, and I was not the same person. Like I gained a ton of weight. It wasn't even just the weight. It was just like the loss of like energy and like vibrancy. And like I really felt it, and I knew it was the food. Mm-hmm. And so I then, got married later on, had kids, and I was wanting to go back to work. I was working in like corporate and blah, blah, blah. And I was wanting to go back to work. And I'm like, I want to do something that I feel like helps people. And I was trying to think like, well, what are my interests and how can I help people? How can I help people even become healthier? And I was like, I can't go to medical school. I'm like too old for that. And like, I didn't even really want to be an RD. I didn't want to like go back to school for that. So I actually was like teaching my friends how to cook. And that's when I was like, cooking from scratch is healthier than going out. And teaching people how to work with whole, real food ingredients is going to make them healthier. Like I don't need to start counseling people and, telling them what supplements to use. I have a food first philosophy. So I'm going to help people understand the benefits of cooking from scratch, making it easy for them, showing them ingredients that they didn't know what to work with that were like delicious, open their eyes to like a whole new world of whole food based, cooking. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm not going to give you the whole long story about how it actually happened, but that's how it happened. I started teaching. It's a very funny long story, but I started teaching people. And it's funny, the lady that my friend who first said like, we want you to start teaching us cooking classes. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. But I ended up saying yes. And she reminded me, I was just talking to her recently. She reminded me that they first requested from me to teach them how to work with foods that they were scared of. And by scared of, I don't mean like octopus. I mean, scared of like at the time, and this was like a long time ago, quinoa and kale. Like nobody knew even how to pronounce quinoa and they were scared of it. So I would like show them how to work with these foods that, they just didn't have recipes for, they didn't grow up with, but they knew that they were like good for you foods. So that's what happened. That's how it all started. And then, I did supplement my education by following a course in holistic nutrition, just to, again, enhance my education. But, I'm a nutrition science junkie. I read a lot of journals and, studies, and I'm trying to keep up with the changing nutrition information that is out there. But that's basically the long and short of it.
Foods that I was first afraid of, you cannot leave out the spaghetti squash. I mean, I just thought, how in the world am I going to turn this into something good? And totally. One of my all-time favorites is that bolognese spaghetti squash casserole thing that with sausage, and it's amazing, and my kids beg me for it. So
that's amazing.
It's so good. But yeah, it took me a long time to really understand. So in my journey, and I don't know if this resonates with anybody, but when I started out reacting to everything, my throat would close up. I would have a lot of pain in my body after eating certain things that didn't make sense, like lemon or pepper, or, I was just, my nerves were on overload. So what I knew is that through a process of simple elimination, what I figured out was glutinous foods were definitely my trigger in the beginning. And so I thought, okay, my mindset was, I still need a bun with my hamburger. So I'm going to go with a gluten-free, almond flour. I don't know. I just was really searching for that. And what I found was I was still reacting. And then, so my journey just sort of slowly developed into now, I don't really have that conditioning that I need to replace bread and pasta with healthier breads and pastas, so to speak, when quotation marks, because
Totally.
it's kind of like swapping out stuff for stuff. And so that was a really big light bulb moment for me when I could just imagine a life without having to go to those heavier carbs and think that I needed that to exist.
Well, I mean, it took you some time. I mean, to your
Yeah.
point, it took you some time. Those things don't just happen overnight, especially when there are traditional foods that maybe we've grown up with, ways of thinking about food, cultural norms. They're hard to break. So if people look at making a change in their diet and feel very overwhelmed and like, I can never do that, I can never live without this or never live without that, like, take a step back, because anything is possible, and we can lean into a different way of eating and just permit ourselves the time that it may take to get used to that.
And
but
also
but
under opening the mind, I can have a burger wrapped in lettuce if I want to. I can also now that I'm out of that horrible acute state, I can have a hamburger with a
right.
bun. But in that beginning stage, yes, it was just sort of changing that mindset.
Well, I was also going to say, unfortunately, sometimes feeling really ill or in a lot of pain after we eat something is a very strong motivator. And it just becomes to that point where it's just like, it is not worth it.
Mhm.
That, 5 minutes of eating that bun, it is just not going to be worth 24 hours of pain.
That's right. And I really, once I did start eliminating certain things, I really realized that sugar was the big um, vehicle for pain, for my pain. And it may not have happened the same day that I ate it. Typically it would show up the next day after it's sat in my body for so long. And that is, if I ever find myself in some pain, that's the first thing that I eliminate. Also, I want to say that in the beginning I kept making these huge decisions like, okay, I'm just going to go vegetarian, or I'm going to be gluten free and all of this, instead of just being easy on myself, which I think your recipes are super easy because they tell you what things to eliminate to make them gluten free or vegetarian. But I assumed, okay, I'm vegetarian now just bring on the pasta. It was
Right.
like I just couldn't find that happy medium. In your cookbooks really, really and truly, I say this from the bottom of my heart, they saved me in so many different ways.
Thank you.
um and can you talk a little bit about your favorite swaps? For instance, I didn't know I could bake without using eggs, and I didn't know that I could make delicious brownies. One of my favorite recipes are your tahini blondies. And I thought, I'm going to just try this. I am telling you, they're so good. I love them. So tell me about some of your favorite swaps.
Well, this could be a long list. I mean, it depends on what we need to swap for. So in baking, for example, a lot of people do struggle with gluten. That doesn't mean that gluten is necessarily bad for everybody. And I'm not trying to tell people how to eat. I'm trying to help people eat the way they would like to. So with gluten, it has become so much easier to make swaps. There are really good gluten-free flour blends out there that are a little bit cleaner than other ones. So back in the day when I was trying to help people bake in a gluten-free way, we had to buy 7 different flours and mix them all up. And now you can buy something like a Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1 or a King Arthur multi-purpose flour. I try and stay away from some of the blends that include cornstarch or a lot of, fillers and things like that. So those are the two that I really like to use. But also there are grain-free baking flours too. And I have my own kind of grain-free formula of, almond flour and coconut flour and arrowroot. But now again, I'm not pushing Bob's Red Mill, but it just happens to be pretty good. Bob's Red Mill has a paleo flour that incorporates those ingredients. But I do want to say that when you are trying to swap non-grain flours for grain flours, even if they're gluten-free or not, there are some other things that you have to adjust for, because usually when you're doing predominantly almond flour, it has no starch in it at all. And it's very oily, and it's high in protein, and that's incredibly different from the composition of grains. So we have to make some adjustments there as well. When you're trying to swap out eggs, that's also pretty easy now. We have some aquafaba that I've had a lot of success with, which is the liquid in a can of cooked chickpeas. And thankfully I eat a lot of chickpeas, so I end up saving that liquid and throwing it in the freezer, and then I can defrost it and whip it up. It's like literal magic. It whips up like egg whites, and you can fold that in. And I have like all these charts in my books and stuff like that, like how much to swap. Depending on the recipe, and this is always the case, depends on the recipe, but you can do flax eggs, which is just like ground flax meal mixed with warm water, or chia egg, which is chia seed mixed with warm water. That can very often be a good binder for eggs. But it also depends, like maybe you want to do a frittata, which is eggs, what can you do in that place? Well, I've had good luck blending tofu and a little chickpea flour, and creating this mixture that very much has the same texture as like a baked egg, which is kind of interesting.
I love that because the eggs I did have to eliminate in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I love eggs.
Sometimes you're just out of eggs and you want to know what to do. Dairy also, that has become very easy to swap for. You can swap coconut milk for heavy cream, or even like a very thick cashew cream. You can swap for a heavy cream. There are so many plant milks. They're not all created equally, of course. Like I mentioned with the gluten-free blends, a lot of them have gums and fillers, and some of those gums don't do well with people. They are very irritating to the digestive tract for some people, right? So I make my own almond milk. I make my own cashew milk. It's not that hard to do. And there are some better plant-based butters now. They are coconut oil and like cashew based, like something like a Miyoko's, like that's pretty easy to do. So it also depends on like what you need a swap out for. Not all swap outs are healthier. So it just, some things for sure give people a reaction. And so like I can, if somebody says to me, like, I can't eat grains, like I've got an autoimmune issue, I can't do grains, like what pastas do you recommend? Like for somebody like that who just wants a little pasta, like, sure, I can tell you what grain-free pastas to eat. But a lot of the grain-free pastas are still high in carbohydrates, because maybe they're adding in, some cassava flour, which is just like a starchy root, right? Or it's like mostly rice flour, and which is also like super high in carbs. So, sometimes people think that if they're going on like a grain-free diet, they're not going to have that blood sugar spike, because they assume that things are like a little lower in carbohydrates, but that's not always the case.
That's a great point.
To me, the best like swap outs really should be with fats though. Like, I know it can be controversial. There are some people that just think that canola oil is fine. I'm not a believer. I'm not a believer. You can find data to support whatever you want to think. I'm just going to be very honest with you there. But in my opinion, these refined oils, these super refined oils are no bueno. They can be very high in omega-6 fats. And they're also lacking the nutrients that something like an olive oil or even an avocado oil have. And it's a total myth that you can't cook with olive oil. You absolutely can. You just don't want it to be smoking.
Mm.
That's all. So you don't want to like preheat your skillet so that it's like super, super, super hot. And then you put your olive oil in there and then it starts smoking. Like that's not good. But you are totally fine to saute with it, to roast with it at 400 degrees. Like it still maintains its integrity and, you know, polyphenols and antioxidants.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really good to know. Yeah, the oils are a bit confusing, I have to admit. I think I must have 8 different types of oils in my pantry, and really understanding the difference. And when you do want to, swap out a coconut for a olive or a, safflower, or, it does get confusing. I don't
Oh,
know if you have a
totally.
chart for that or not.
Well, totally. But here's the thing also is that not all oils are going to work for everybody. So coconut oil, yeah, it's more stable at higher temperatures. I'll give people that, but it's not good for people who are very sensitive to, things that will raise their LDL. So if you have, especially people with like genetic heart disease, there are people that, the coconut oil is just going to raise their LDL. And there's kind of nothing that I'm going to say that's going to change that. So for those people, like, who you are, maybe don't use so much coconut oil. If you want to use it every once in a while, fine. But a teaspoon here, a teaspoon there. But like, I wouldn't make that like my go-to oil if that's who you are, right?
Right. And I remember long ago, one of your first pieces of advice to me, which I still remember, is that you said, you were sort of like making the point, if an oil in its natural state is hard, like coconut, why you just did not trust buying the oil already melted and like in that free other state that it would be existing in. And I've always thought about that. It's so true.
Yeah, I mean, for the coconut oil that they have that's refined and already like super liquidy.
Yeah.
Not a fan.
Yeah.
Not a fan. And I even use like olive oil for baking. So if a recipe calls for a vegetable oil in like a pumpkin bread, I will substitute olive oil and it tastes great.
That's wonderful. And you're getting all the good, yummy, good parts of the olive oil, which is so healthy for us too. A lot of people out there have chronic fatigue. And the thing with chronic fatigue is it turns to like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you really just want a bite of chocolate because you're thinking in your mind, your subconscious is telling you, I need a pick me up of some sort. I can't have coffee. I'm literally dragging my feet. What I love about your cookbooks, I love you have a whole section on protein balls that you can make, and different things like that to give you a little boost of energy without sacrificing a lot of your commitment to your health. So I love that section. Also in your new cookbook, I love the Instant Pot recipes.
Mm-hmm.
Those have been very helpful because that's just such a new way for busy people to cook, and I love that.
Great.
Are there any foods that you'll never touch again? Like, are there things that are off limits for you?
Yeah, I won't do soda. So like a traditional Coca-Cola or a ginger ale or anything like that. It's just, that is a blood sugar spiker like nothing else. There's no reason for it. Like if I want something bubbly, then I'll have some sparkling water and maybe I'll squeeze a little grapefruit juice into it, or I'll drink a Spindrift, or I'll add a splash of like a drop of stevia if I want to sweeten it up. I haven't had soda in so long that I just don't need it. I also won't drink fruit juice. So I will never drink like a glass of orange juice. That is just as much of a blood sugar spiker. There's no need for juice in my life. So I won't do that. I also won't touch things like soybean oil or like a Wesson oil, or, going back to the oils that we talk about, these like really heavily processed plastic bottle type oils. That's not for me. I don't eat cereal. Also not something that I need in my life. Cereals are just, they're really processed grains. And I really do believe that glyphosate is a problem and it's not healthy for us. Again, you can find documentation to support whatever you want to believe on glyphosate. But for now, I'm going to try my best to avoid it. And glyphosate is like it's basically an antibiotic for plants. It's a pesticide, but it's like an antibiotic. And it's just, I don't think it's good for the gut lining. And I think that some people that think that they are reacting to gluten are actually reacting to glyphosate.
Interesting.
So it's a theory. And they are spraying a lot of our grain crops with glyphosate as a desiccant, as a drying agent. So it may not be sprayed on the crops in the field, but afterwards. So a lot of grains are now, really heavily laced with glyphosate. So I try and buy as many organic grain products as possible. But, those are probably the top ones. And like, I just feel like I love myself too much to like eat like cheap sweets. So if it's something that I make myself or like something a little bit more high quality, like, trust me, I have a sweet tooth just like everybody else, but like, I'm not going to dive into like the real processed, like candy and with food coloring and things like that.
Yeah. Eating healthy does take so much of a mental commitment. I'm thinking about everybody just starting out there that, doesn't even have access to certain, things that we've just discussed. It's difficult, but it's also not impossible. And we all just need to get back to the basics. Even though you don't have fruit juice, you'll have fruit though, whole fruit.
Oh yeah, I eat fruit all the time. I had fruit this morning. I prefer fruit in its whole form. I mean, my sister is a type 1 diabetic. So I grew up with her having diabetes since she was a little girl. If her blood sugar went low, she would take a swig of orange juice to bring it back up as quickly as possible. That has stuck with me. Okay. So, I know that, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of vitamin C in fruit or whatever, but I've been talking about an anti-inflammatory, low-glycemic diet since I started teaching. I'm still standing by that. That can mean, and what's nice about that is that you have freedom within that. It doesn't mean that you need to be vegan. It doesn't mean that you need to be Whole30. You can find a range in there to be whatever you want it to be. And you can be plant-based one day and you could be eating meat another day. But understanding that a low glycemic diet is, with as many whole plant foods as possible, in my opinion, is really the way to go.
It really, really is. And that's where I've landed too. And I think that's why I'm resonating so heavily on your cookbooks. I just never had a reaction. I talked about my throat closing up and things like that in the beginning. I never had an adverse reaction personally to animal protein and most vegetables and most fruits. Salads get tricky for me because of this salad dressing at times and all of that. Unless I'm making it homemade at home, I just really don't eat salads out and about when I'm, at a restaurant. So your sheet pan recipes, for instance, are great because they're delicious. They're lean and they're animal protein and yummy vegetables, and they're seasonal, and they have yummy spice combinations that you put in there. So it's really quite easy. Your cookbooks have been just very easy to follow.
Thank you.
Very easy.
Well, what I have to say, I have been to a lot of different supermarkets around the country including Walmart and including Target. And they have a lot of very good, healthful offerings for people. You know, believe me, I don't think Whole Foods is the be all and the end all. There are plenty of good options for even produce at a place like Walmart. I am also a huge fan of frozen vegetables. I think frozen vegetables are very easy to work with, and they are frozen at like the peak of ripeness. So their vitamins and their minerals are really maximized. And you can find wild fish in the freezer section at Walmart and some even Targets too. And the same thing goes for, you know, grass-fed beef. At my local Walmart and other ones that I've seen too around the country, there's a lot of grass-fed beef, which I think may surprise people. Costco too. Costco is really expanding with their organic and more these products that maybe before where people were like, what is that? Like, you can find hemp seeds and raw cacao powder and, like, again, a lot of organics and organic frozen fruit at such a good price. So it's becoming a little bit easier.
It is. It is definitely. You just have to know what you're looking for and go in there. And I always say, because we have a lake house in another state and it's out in the middle of nowhere. And I do have to shop and get to shop at Walmart and things like that. There's also a health food restaurant, but it takes me 30 minutes to get there. So, you know, you just have to walk in and just say simple, simple, simple.
Yes.
Get back to the basics. Like you said, go to the produce section, you can fill a basket with produce and just cook for days and days and days.
Have you ever shopped with thrivemarket.com?
No, but I saw that. I saw that you were talking about that the other day. Tell us about that.
I've been a member and I pay full retail for my membership like everybody else. I have no affiliation with them at all, but I am obsessed with them. So they've been around for a couple of years now, but it's really a lot of these more, I'm going to say more healthful products, but they are shelf stable products. Okay. So, you know, oils and nuts and, you know, whatever, protein powders and bars and chips and whatever. So some of the snacky foods too. But they also have private label products and the prices are so much better than at like a Whole Foods, for example. I saved so much money shopping on thrivemarket.com. And for people who qualify, for people, you know, at a certain income level who qualify, they will waive your membership fee.
Amazing. I had no idea about this. Oh my gosh. We're going to talk about that. You know, that's really good to know. I love these tidbits of information. So here for my YouTubers, here's what the cookbook looks like. This is Kitchen Matters. This one is Quicker Than Quick with beautiful Pamela on the covers. And can you tell us, do you have any other projects in the work?
I've been teaching a lot online for the last 2.5 years. So I actually haven't taught in person. I've been doing a monthly online cooking class I have subscribers for that. I mean, anybody can join in at any time. I've been doing that even pre-pandemic. And so I'm still focused on that. And then I've created a lot of cooking courses with different themes. So I have those, and I'm going to reignite my YouTube channel. So I'm just kind of gearing up to do that. I mean, I have a ton of videos on there already. And I have a Thanksgiving ebook, depending on when this comes out, which is basically like your ultimate Thanksgiving cookbook that like practically nothing. So that is going to be for sale. And I just don't know about doing another book. I still have a little PTSD from Quicker Than Quick coming out at the very beginning of a pandemic, and my entire book tour was canceled. And so I'm a little bit still raw about that, but I have so many book ideas in my head that it's tempting.
When it's the right time, you will, I'm sure. But, speaking of the pandemic, even though it shut down so much, and I'm sure it was a huge disappointment to have your little baby not be brought into the world like you really wanted it to be. The upside is that I do believe people are paying much closer attention to their health and the way that they eat because of the pandemic. I think that it brought to light everybody's health conditions in a big, fast, swift way.
I mean, I'd like to think so. I think something that, was talked about was the fact that, for example, with COVID, people that weren't faring well with COVID, and this is not really a blanket statement. So I know that there were always, exceptions to this, but were people who had inflammatory conditions to begin with. And a lot of people in the wellness sphere were saying, like, now can we talk about these inflammatory conditions, please? So I'd like to think that people are talking about it. I'm not sure, but again, changes are sometimes hard for a culture to make. And I have also found what is true is that the people that you surround yourself with in your community, in your friend group, in your extended family, like whoever it is that you spend the most time with, those people will influence how you eat. And there is a statement which I believe to be true, which is that your zip code is a bigger determinant of your health than your genetics, because lifestyle and our food choices kind of are it's not everything, but it's a big part of, determining your health outcomes. So what does that mean? It means, like, well, when you hang out with your friends, like, what are you doing? Are you playing pickleball? Are you going for walks? Or are you going to meet for cinnamon rolls and like iced lattes? When you have dinner with your friends, are you guys cooking together? Are you making, some grilled fish and salads? Or are you like eating and partying, and there's a place for all of it, but it's like, what are you doing most of the time? Not once in a while. Like, what are you doing most of the time? And that's what really has an effect on us, what we do most of the time.
Yeah, that's very true. And I know that, the family influence is huge, and we're coming up on the holidays and get-togethers and family and friends, and you go on vacation for 5 or 6 days, and all of a sudden you're back at square one because you have imbibed in everything and you didn't bring your own stuff or think ahead of time or like offered to help make a great healthful side dish or something like that. So yeah, it's waking up the mind. And I think that our listeners specifically are very, very in tune to all this and just soaking up all this information. Thank you so much for your time. I'd love for you to just tell them quickly where they can find you, Pamela.
My pleasure. So it's really easy to find me because everything is just my name, PamelaSalzman.com. I'm very active on Instagram. So I do a lot of videos on Instagram, and that's just at Pamela Salzman. Again, there are YouTube videos that you can check out. And there's a lot of free recipes. And plus I have a great newsletter that's free that comes out every Monday that it's just a way for me to connect with my community and share things that I'm loving lately, new products or a new podcast that I thought was super enlightening, or an article, or just a recipe that maybe I didn't take a million photos of, but I love to share it with them in a casual way. So, you can sign up for my free newsletter by going to my website as well.
So for anybody out there, it's Pamela, spelled the normal way, and then Salzman, Pamela Salzman. It was such a pleasure to reconnect with you after all this time. I love that we reconnected and just were able to talk on a different level this time about our health and food and all of that. So thank you for your time. We will be tuning in for sure.
Okay. Thanks for having me. Have a
Okay.
wonderful day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.